The sky still held the last stars when Caroline was already up, lacing her time-worn boots. The clock read 5 in the morning at Hope Ranch, located in the countryside of Missouri, where the mountains embraced the green pastures and the dew sparkled like tiny diamonds on the grass. For the daughter of rancher Samuel Thompson, this routine was as natural as breathing. At 19, Caroline knew every inch of that land, every animal, every tree that provided shade on the hottest days. "Good morning, Dad," she greeted as she found Samuel in the rustic kitchen of the main house. The man, his face weathered by the sun and his hands calloused, smiled, handing her a mug of strong coffee. "Good morning, daughter. Tony said we have a difficult berth in the east pasture. Daisy is having trouble." Caroline nodded, sipping the hot coffee. Daisy was one of the best dairy cows on the ranch, a Holstein of considerable value to the family's modest business. Without wasting time, she grabbed her veterinary first aid kit and headed toward the pasture. The walk under the gradually brightening sky brought a sense of peace to the young woman. That land was an extension of her own body, every rise and fall of the terrain mapped in her memory. Unlike many girls her age who dreamed of life in the big city, Caroline found purpose in tending to the animals, in the intimate relationship with nature, in the perfect cycle of rural life. When she reached the pasture, she found the foreman Tony already positioned beside the cow, who was breathing heavily. "The calf is in a bad position, Caroline," explained the middle-aged man, concern evident. On his wrinkled face, "I don't think there's any way." Without responding, Caroline knelt beside the suffering animal. Her small but firm hands worked with precision, guided by the experience she had gained since childhood. After nearly an hour of effort, the calf was finally born, a small creature with light brown fur that made no sound as it entered the world. "He's too weak," observed Tony, shaking his head. "And look, Daisy doesn't even want anything to do with him." It was true. The cow, exhausted from the difficult birth, moved away from her calf, a rare and concerning behavior. The calf trembled on the ground, his big eyes seeming to plead for help, and his thin legs barely managed to support his frustrated attempts to stand. "Better call Joe to put an end to this," suggested Tony, with the pragmatic harshness of someone who had lived their entire life on the ranch. "He won't make it, and even if he does, he won't be good for anything. He's a male, he won't produce milk, and with that build he won't even be good for meat." Caroline felt something tighten in her chest. The calf's eyes seemed fixed on hers, establishing a silent connection that transcended words. "No," she replied firmly, surprising the foreman. "I'll take care of him." "But girl, you're wasting your time. We already have enough calves, and this one wasn't even accepted by his mother. It's nature saying that—" "I said I'll take care of him," interrupted Caroline, her voice revealing unshakable determination. Without waiting for a response, she took off her denim jacket and wrapped the trembling animal. With effort, she lifted him in her arms, feeling his fragility. "I'll call him Brave," she said, more to herself than to Tony, who watched the scene with a mix of disbelief and resignation. In the following weeks, Caroline dedicated every free moment to little Brave. She set him up in an adapted space in the barn near the main house, where she could monitor him constantly. She woke at dawn to feed him with a bottle, applied the medications recommended by the local vet, and spent hours just keeping him company, speaking softly, telling stories as if the calf could understand every word. The news of Caroline's madness quickly spread throughout the region. One Sunday, while the young woman was in the barn with Brave, a luxurious pickup truck arrived at Hope Ranch, kicking up dust on the dirt road. It was the Brooks family, owners of Empire Ranch, the largest producer of milk and beef in the state. Richard Brooks, along with his wife Elaine and their twin sons, Greg and Grant, 22 years old, stepped out of the vehicle with the arrogance characteristic of the nouveau riche. "Samuel, we came to see if the rumors are true," said Richard, with a condescending smile. "They say your daughter adopted a worthless calf and is treating the animal like it's a person." Samuel, a simple but proud man, felt his face flush. "My daughter has a good heart, Richard. I don't see anything wrong with that." "A good heart doesn't pay the bills, my friend," replied the wealthy rancher, while his sons laughed among themselves. "At our ranch, weak animals are discarded. There's no room for sentimentality in agribusiness. Caroline appeared at that moment, drawn by the voices. Her face flushed intensely when she realized she was the target of the Brooks twins' laughter, known throughout the region for their arrogant behavior and their habit of flaunting the trophies they won in cattle competitions. "So this is the calf nurse?" teased Greg, the taller of the twins. "They say you even sing him to sleep. Is that true, Caroline?" "Leave her alone," intervened Samuel, noticing his daughter's discomfort. "We're just curious," continued Grant, approaching Caroline. "After all, who wastes time caring for an animal that certainly won't bring any return? That's emotional management, not business management." Caroline remained silent, but her green eyes, inherited from her mother, who had passed away years before, shone with a mix of shame and determination. At that moment, something inside her strengthened, an inexplicable certainty that Brave would prove his worth. "You can laugh all you want," she finally said, raising her chin, "but one day, everyone will see what this calf is capable of." The twins exchanged amused glances, while Richard Brooks shook his head, as if he were dealing with a stubborn child. "Dear, our bulls have international pedigrees. They're rodeo champions, award-winning specimens. Your little calf will never come close to them." The Brooks family left shortly after, leaving behind a trail of laughter and derogatory comments. But Caroline, instead of being discouraged, returned to the barn with firm and determined steps. Brave greeted her with a weak moo, his legs still unsteady. She stroked his head, looking directly into the animal's eyes. "They don't believe in you," she whispered. "But I do. And together, we'll show everyone what you're capable of." The calf gently nudged Caroline's hand with his wet snout, as if sealing that silent promise. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red. It was the end of a day, but for Caroline and Brave, it was just the beginning of a journey that would change their lives forever. The months passed like pages of a book turned by the wind. Each day, Caroline watched in amazement as Brave transformed. What was once a trembling, fragile calf gradually became a strong and imposing animal. His light brown coat gained a shine under the constant care of the young woman, and his eyes, once fearful, now displayed a liveliness that surprised everyone at Hope Ranch. At 10 months old, Brave no longer fit in the adapted space in the barn. Samuel, initially skeptical about his daughter's decision, couldn't deny that the animal had exceeded all expectations. Reluctantly, he gave over a small pasture exclusively for the growing bull. "I have to admit, daughter," Samuel commented, one September afternoon, as they watched Brave run freely through the pasture, "you've worked a miracle with this animal." Caroline smiled, proud. "It wasn't a miracle, Dad. It was love and patience." The rancher hugged his daughter's shoulders, feeling a mix of admiration and concern. "Still, Carol, don't get your hopes up too much. He may have survived, but he's far from being a competition animal or of great commercial value." The young woman didn't respond immediately. Her eyes followed Brave's graceful movements, who, despite his humble origins, displayed unusual strength and agility. "Do you remember Grandpa's story about Thunder?" Samuel frowned, surprised by the mention of the legendary bull that had belonged to his father and, decades ago, had briefly made the Thompson family famous in the regional rodeo circuit. "What does Thunder have to do with this?" "I found old photos of him in the attic," Caroline explained. "And Brave has the same markings on his forehead, Dad. That pattern that looks like a lightning bolt. It can't be a coincidence." The man looked more closely at the grazing animal. Indeed, there was a white mark on Brave's forehead, forming a pattern that vaguely resembled a lightning bolt, exactly like the famous Thunder, an animal that had been sold reluctantly after the great drought of 1985, when the family had almost lost everything. "Even if there's some distant relation, daughter, times are different now. Today, what matters is pedigree, registration. The Brookses dominate the market precisely because they invest in imported genetics, in technology." "Maybe," conceded Caroline, "but the St. John's Rodeo is coming up, and I'm entering Brave." Samuel's eyes widened. "Have you lost your mind?" The Brookses have won that rodeo for 8 years straight. They'll laugh in our faces if we show up there with an animal of unproven lineage." "Let them laugh," replied Caroline, determination shining in her green eyes. "Brave will prove his worth." 3 weeks later, Caroline began training. With only the help of young Tyler, Tony's son, she adapted techniques she had observed in videos and books about preparing animals for rodeo. Brave, surprisingly, responded with intelligence to the commands, learning with impressive speed. On sunny afternoons while they trained in the makeshift field behind the barn, it wasn't uncommon to see the Brooks pickup truck slowly passing by on the road. The twins Greg and Grant made a point of stopping to watch, laughing and making derogatory comments loudly. "Look at that! The calf trainer now thinks she has a rodeo champion," shouted Grant one day, provoking laughter from his brother. Caroline ignored the taunts, focusing only on Brave and the special bond they had developed. The animal seemed to understand every word, every gesture, responding with a synchronicity that bordered on the supernatural. One particularly hot afternoon, while Caroline was adjusting the training equipment, the Brooks pickup truck stopped, once again. This time, however, besides the twins, Richard Brooks also stepped out of the vehicle, walking with an air of superiority to the fence that bordered the training field. "Samuel told me about your ambition," commented Richard, looking down at Brave. "I must say I'm impressed by your persistence, Caroline, but also concerned." The young woman continued her work, pretending not to care about the presence of the unwanted visitors. "Concerned?" she finally asked without diverting her attention from her task. "Yes, concerned," continued Richard, his tone falsely paternal. "The St. John's Rodeo is no joke. Our emperor has been undefeated for 3 consecutive competitions. He's of pure lineage, trained by the best professionals in the country." Caroline finally turned to face the rancher. "So?" Richard laughed, exchanging amused glances with his sons. "So, my dear, you're going to embarrass yourself. You'll expose your father, your family, and this little ranch to ridicule. Why not accept reality? This animal may be beautiful to your infatuated eyes, but he'll never be on the same level as ours." Caroline felt her blood boil, but she maintained her composure. Years of hard work on the ranch had taught her to control her emotions. "If you're so confident, why do you bother coming here to watch us?" she questioned, a slight smile on her lips. Richard's face reddened slightly. "We were just passing by," he deflected, "but since the subject came up, I have a proposal for you." Caroline crossed her arms, suspicious. "Give up the competition," he continued, "and I'll buy this animal for a fair price. He may not be a champion, but he seems healthy enough for breeding at some smaller ranch." The offer caught Caroline by surprise. For a moment she thought about the financial difficulties Hope Ranch was facing, the accumulated bills, the broken tractor that urgently needed repair. "How much?" she asked, more out of curiosity than real interest. Richard Brooks smiled, thinking he had found the young woman's weak spot. $10,000. It's more than he's worth, to be honest. Consider it a gesture of good neighborliness." The Sauda twins smiled, anticipating their father's victory. They knew that tactic well. Richard Brooks had expanded his empire precisely by buying at low prices what others didn't value, and then extracting unexpected value. Caroline looked at Brave, who had stopped his movements and was watching the scene attentively, as if understanding what was at stake. The bond between the two was more than a simple relationship between human and animal. It was a partnership based on mutual trust and respect. "He's not for sale," she finally replied, her voice calm but firm. "We'll see you at the rodeo." "Mr. Brooks." The smile disappeared from the rancher's face, replaced by an expression of poorly concealed irritation. "You'll regret this," he muttered, turning to leave. "Let's go, boys." After the pickup truck disappeared down the dusty road, Tyler approached Caroline, admiration evident on his young face. "Wow, Carol. $10,000 is a lot of money." "Not for them," replied the young woman, stroking Brave's strong neck, "and not for what Brave is really worth." The following weeks were intense preparation. The news that Samuel Thompson's daughter had entered a common animal to compete against the Brooks champions spread quickly, generating both scornful laughter and admiration for the young woman's courage. On the eve of the rodeo, Caroline took Brave for a sunset walk, just the two of them, away from prying eyes and others' opinions. They walked to the top of the hill that marked the boundary of Hope Ranch, where they could see the entire property, and in the distance, the city lights beginning to turn on. "Tomorrow's the big day," she said, sitting on the soft grass while Brave grazed calmly beside her. "No matter what happens, you're already a winner to me." The animal approached, laying his massive head on the young woman's lap, a gesture of affection that brought tears to Caroline's eyes. In that silent moment, under the sky gradually filling with stars, she felt an inexplicable certainty that something extraordinary was about to happen. The next morning, a sunny Saturday typical of the countryside, Hope Ranch buzzed with activity. Samuel, finally caught up in his daughter's enthusiasm, organized Brave's transport with a care that reflected his growing pride. Tony and Tyler helped with the preparations, while other ranch hands, initially skeptical, now offered words of encouragement. "Ready?" Caroline asked Brave, adjusting the equipment the animal would wear during transport. In response, Brave let out a powerful moo that echoed through the valley, as if announcing to the world his determination. It was time to show everyone what an animal raised with love and respect could achieve. It was time to turn mockery into admiration and rewrite the destiny of an entire ranch. The St. John's Fairgrounds had never been so busy. Colorful banners fluttered in the wind, food stalls lined the sides, and the smell of earth mixed with the aroma of barbecue filled the air. Pickup trucks and specialized trailers filled the parking lot, displaying logos of large ranches and renowned breeders. The annual rodeo was more than a competition. It was a social event that brought together ranchers, investors, and enthusiasts from across the region. The arrival of the small pickup truck from Hope Ranch didn't immediately draw attention. It was only when Brave stepped out of the adapted truck bed that eyes began to turn toward the impressive animal with a shiny coat. Many watched with curiosity, others with poorly concealed disdain. "So this is the famous Thompson bull," commented a breeder, observing Brave from a distance. "He's a fine specimen, but without a pedigree he won't go far." Caroline heard the comment, but remained focused on her task. With Tyler's help, she led Brave to the designated stable, ignoring the looks and whispers that followed them. Samuel walked behind, alternating between expressions of pride and concern. "Number 17, Caroline read on the stable plaque. "This is our space, Brave." The animal entered calmly, as if understanding the importance of the moment, while Caroline and Tyler organized the equipment. A growing buzz announced the arrival of new participants. "The Brookses are here," murmured Tyler, peeking through the stable opening. Caroline didn't need to look to know that the rival family was making their grand entrance. The Brooks entourage was impossible to miss. 3 huge trucks, customized with the golden logo of Empire Ranch, and a team of at least 15 people, including handlers, veterinarians, and assistants. Emperor, the Brooks champion bull, was led with pomp to his stable, significantly larger and better equipped than the others. The animal was impressive, black as coal, muscles defined under his shiny coat, and a presence that intimidated even the most experienced competitors. "Pathetic," commented Greg Brooks as he passed the stable where Brave rested. "Do you really think this beast has any chance?" Caroline ignored the taunt, continuing to prepare Brave for the competition. She had already faced enough disbelief. A few more hours of mockery wouldn't make a difference. The competition began at 2 in the afternoon with the traditional parade of participating animals. Brave, under Caroline's precise guidance, surprised the audience with his proud posture and disciplined behavior. Even alongside the most expensive and renowned bulls, the animal from Hope Ranch didn't seem out of place. "Is that really the rejected calf the girl saved?" asked a woman in the stands. "He looks like a champion." The comment didn't go unnoticed by Richard Brooks, who watched the parade with a tense expression. Something about Brave's presence deeply unsettled him, a familiarity he couldn't explain. The first events quickly eliminated half the competitors. Physical endurance, response to basic commands, morphological evaluation. In each stage, Brave demonstrated surprising qualities for an animal without professional training or recognized lineage. When the announcer declared that number 17, Brave from Hope Ranch, had qualified for the final round, a murmur of admiration swept through the audience. Caroline, exhausted but radiant, led her companion back to the stable for a well-deserved rest before the decisive event. "We're among the top 5 finalists, Brave," she whispered, stroking the animal's muzzle. "You're proving your worth to all of them." Samuel approached, emotion evident in his usually reserved eyes. "Carol, this is unbelievable," Samuel said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Even if we don't win, we've already gone further than anyone could have imagined." Caroline smiled at her father, but there was something in her gaze that said she wouldn't settle for just making it this far. It was the same determined look she had when she found the weak calf in the pasture and decided against all advice to save him. The final round of the rodeo would begin in an hour. As Caroline mentally reviewed every detail of the upcoming event, an unexpected figure appeared at the stable entrance. A tall man with graying hair and an impeccable suit, clearly out of place in the rural setting. "Miss Thompson?" he asked with a slight accent. "My name is Edward Vasquez. I'm a researcher at the University of Missouri and an international consultant in bovine genetics. May I have a moment?" Intrigued, Caroline nodded. The man approached. Brave with an analytical gaze, studying every detail of the animal with professional interest. "Impressive," he murmured, more to himself than to Caroline. "The markings on the forehead, the structure of the back. How long have you had this animal?" "Since he was born," Caroline replied. "Why?" Vasquez pulled a small device from his pocket, similar to a portable scanner. "With your permission, I'd like to take a small sample for analysis. I have a suspicion I need to confirm." Before Caroline could respond, Richard Brooks appeared, accompanied by his sons and 2 burly security guards. "Vasquez," he exclaimed, visibly agitated. "What are you doing here?" The researcher smiled politely. "Hello, Richard, just doing my job." "Your job is with Empire Ranch," Richard retorted, his tone threatening. "Have you forgotten the exclusivity contract you signed?" "A contract you broke unilaterally," Vasquez replied calmly. "I'm free to consult with whomever I choose now." Caroline watched the exchange with growing curiosity. There was clearly a complex history between the 2 men, and somehow Brave was at the center of it. "What's going on?" she finally asked. Vasquez turned to her, ignoring Richard's furious expression. "Miss Thompson, I believe your bull carries a rare genetic lineage, possibly a direct descendant of the legendary Thunderbolt of the Plains." The name caused an immediate reaction among those present. Thunderbolt of the Plains was almost mythical in the world of American cattle breeding, a bull of exceptional traits whose semen had been highly sought after until his mysterious disappearance 2 decades ago. "That's absurd," Richard exclaimed, his face red with anger. "Thunderbolt belonged to my family. All his descendants are catalogued and belong to Empire Ranch." "Not all," Vasquez replied enigmatically, "and I believe you know that better than anyone, Richard." The tension in the air was palpable. Even Brave, usually calm, shifted uneasily in the stable. Caroline positioned herself protectively beside the animal, trying to process the implications of this revelation. "Attention, competitors," a voice announced over the loudspeaker. "The final round will begin in 15 minutes. Please prepare your animals." Richard Brooks shot one last threatening look at Vasquez before turning to leave with his entourage. "This isn't over," he warned. Vasquez turned back to Caroline, his expression serious. "Miss Thompson, we need to talk after the competition. If I'm right, and I firmly believe I am, your bull is worth far more than anyone here realizes." The final event was the most challenging, a complex course testing agility, strength, and the synergy between animal and handler. Caroline and Brave would be the second to last to compete, right before the reigning champions, the Brooks. From her spot in the waiting area, Caroline watched the first 3 finalists complete the course with solid but unremarkable performances. When her name was announced, an expectant silence fell over the arena. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the surprise of the competition, directly from Hope Ranch Brave, handled by Caroline Thompson. Caroline took a deep breath, looking into Brave's eyes one last time before they entered the arena. "Let's go, buddy. It's just you and me now, like it's always been." What happened next became rodeo history. Brave moved with a combination of power and grace that left the audience in awe. Every obstacle was overcome with impressive precision, every movement executed flawlessly. The connection between Caroline and the animal went beyond technical training. It was a near telepathic communication, born from months of companionship and mutual trust. When they crossed the finish line, the clock showed a time that beat the previous competition record. The crowd erupted in applause. People who moments earlier hadn't known Hope Ranch's name were now chanting in unison, "Brave, brave." Caroline dismounted, hugging the powerful neck of her companion, tears of joy streaming down her face. Samuel ran to his daughter, lifting her in his arms in celebration, while Tony and Tyler cheered enthusiastically from the sidelines. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our defending champions, from Empire Ranch Emperor, handled by Greg Brooks. Silence returned to the arena. Emperor was impressive, no one could deny that, and Greg Brooks was an experienced handler. The performance began with the mechanical precision typical of professional training. Every movement calculated, every obstacle overcome with impeccable technique. Yet something was missing. The audience, who moments earlier had been electrified by Caroline and Brave's performance, now watched with distant admiration, as if appreciating a technically perfect but soulless work of art. When the final time was announced, a collective sigh swept through the venue. Emperor had completed the course just 2 seconds slower than Brave, and the winner of the 43rd St. John's Rodeo is Brave from Hope Ranch. The explosion of joy that followed was indescribable. Caroline, still in disbelief, was lifted onto the shoulders of a group of newfound admirers. Samuel wept openly, unashamed of the emotions overflowing. Even Tony, the always serious foreman, wore a grin from ear to ear. Amid the celebration, Caroline noticed the devastated expressions of the Brooks family. Richard looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The twins, for the first time since she had known them, showed no arrogance, only shock and disbelief. Hours later, with the gleaming trophy placed in the truck bed and Brave comfortably settled in the trailer, Caroline finally found a moment to speak with Edward Vasquez, who had been waiting patiently. "Congratulations, Miss Thompson," the researcher said. "Your victory was more than deserved." "Thank you," Caroline replied, "but now I want to understand what you meant about Brave's lineage." Vasquez looked around, ensuring they were alone. "What I'm about to tell you is known to very few. Thunderbolt. Of the planes didn't disappear as the official story claims. He was secretly sold to a small rancher after Richard Brooks discovered the animal carried an extraordinary genetic mutation." "What kind of mutation?" Caroline asked, intrigued. "One that allows the transmission of superior traits with an almost perfect success rate. Simply put, nearly all descendants inherit the best qualities of the sire, a phenomenon extremely rare in animal genetics." "And what does that have to do with Brave?" "The markings on the forehead, the body structure, the exceptional intelligence. Everything indicates he's a direct descendant of Thunderbolt. If my suspicions are confirmed, your bull is literally worth millions." Caroline tried to process the information. "But how is that possible? Brave was born on our ranch, from one of our cows." Vasquez smiled. "Remember the bull your father mentioned, the famous Thunder? I've researched old records. He was sold to the Brooks family during the Great Drought and then mysteriously died. I believe Thunder was Thunderbolt's son, and somehow that lineage continued on your ranch even without your knowledge." At that moment, Samuel approached, curious about the lengthy conversation. "Dad," Caroline called, "did you have more? Animals from Thunder's line when he was sold?" The old rancher thought for a moment. "Well, we had a heifer, his sister. We kept her because she wasn't worth much at the time." "Why?" "What happened to her?" Caroline pressed, starting to connect the dots. "She died a few years ago. She was Daisy's mother, Brave's mother." Vasquez nodded, confirming his theory. "That explains everything. The lineage remained dormant for generations, occasionally manifesting in small details until culminating in Brave, a specimen." that combines all the exceptional traits of his ancestors. Richard Brooks appeared suddenly, as if materializing from the shadows. His normally arrogant face now showed an almost pleading expression. $100,000, he said without preamble. That's my final offer for the animal. Caroline faced the man who had belittled her for so long. He's not for sale, Mr. Brooks. Never was. 200,000, Richard increased, desperation evident in his voice. You don't understand what you have. On the contrary, Vasquez interjected. Miss Thompson understands perfectly Brave's value, and it's not just monetary. Richard shot a furious look at the researcher. You're ruining everything. Years of work, millions invested in our breeding program. Perhaps it's time to rethink your methods, Vasquez suggested calmly. Nature sometimes surprises us when we least expect it. Defeated, Richard walked away, but not without one last look at Brave, a look that mixed greed, admiration, and deep regret. A week after the rodeo, Hope Ranch was no longer the same. Newspaper articles and local TV programs highlighted the impressive story of Caroline and Brave. Breeders from across the country called, interested in the extraordinary animal that had defeated the Brooks champions. Edward Vasquez, after completing his genetic analysis, confirmed his suspicions. Brave not only descended from Thunderbolt's lineage, but carried even more valuable genetic traits. I have a proposal, Vasquez said to Caroline and Samuel as they sat on the ranch house porch. I don't want to buy Brave. I know that's out of the question. What I propose is a partnership. What kind of partnership? Samuel asked, wary after years of unfavorable dealings with big ranchers. A breeding program based on Brave's lineage, with Hope Ranch as the operations center. I'll provide the scientific knowledge, laboratory infrastructure, and international contacts. Caroline and her father exchanged surprised looks. This would completely change our reality, Samuel murmured. Exactly, Vasquez agreed. In a few years, Hope Ranch could become a national reference in elite bovine genetics. And the Brookses? Caroline asked. Won't they try to interfere? Vasquez smiled. Richard already has enough problems. Several investors have withdrawn their support after the rodeo defeat. The era of Empire Ranch's dominance is coming to an end. 3 months later, the first results of the program were already visible. Hope Ranch's facilities were modernized, new employees hired, and Brave's name became synonymous with excellence in the industry. On a sunny afternoon, Caroline stood in the same pasture where, months earlier, she had found a fragile, rejected calf. Brave grazed calmly beside her, his imposing presence now recognized by all. Who would have thought, huh? She said, stroking the animal's muzzle. From reject to king. Brave gently nudged her hand in that affectionate gesture that had become characteristic between them. Caroline smiled, gazing at the horizon where the sun began to set, painting the sky with golden hues. The small Hope Ranch, once struggling to survive, now pulsed with new life and purpose. And it had all started with a simple act of compassion. A young woman who saw value where others saw only weakness, who bet on the power of perseverance when everyone around her doubted. Brave, she murmured. You didn't just change our lives. You taught us that true value lies beyond appearances, beyond others' expectations. It's in the heart, in determination, in the ability to overcome obstacles with dignity. The bull raised his head, as if understanding every word. On the horizon, the future of Hope Ranch shone as brightly as the setting sun, promising a new dawn full of possibilities.